Hello and welcome to Men of the Den. My name's Eric and it's Friday. This week on Men of the Den, it is Challenges Week. However, I am still deep in the midst of building a campaign. So in continuance of last week's video, I'm going to give you a second part on what I do to build a campaign. So the primary thing that I want to talk about today is building a timeline. So in our previous video, we talked about the who, the what, and the wheres. And now I'm going to be talking about when. When does all of this take place? Well, I knew that one of the main antagonists, probably the primary antagonist that I want for this entire series, this entire campaign to be, is politician. So that means that there's going to probably be a finale that takes place in November around an election. And so I'm going to start working backward from there. Well, what I did to start that process was I took a look at what are the different kinds of things that take place over the course of a year, and I started building out a timeline. So starting at November and going to November, that gives me a full year, year and a month, to kind of look at what's happening in here. So the first thing that I wanted to look at was the political campaign system. So I've got down that canvassing probably begins around a year out, and then that wraps up around March. And then people start putting out yard signs, and then there's the primaries that take place in May, and then ads start pumping out in the summertime, and then eventually we get candidate appearances and debates, and then an election. So all of that is kind of the life cycle of a single year in a political campaign. So that's our primary antagonist's storyline. And then I fleshed out the rest of this actually on a whiteboard. So if you look at the title card to this episode, you can actually see the whole campaign laid out in great big glorious detail about when different characters come in and what they're particularly going through at those different times in the year. Well, the other thing that I did to try to understand where characters would be entering into the story was to look at the interconnectedness between them. So if you're talking about a conspiracy, you're going to be looking at having all of these people working collectively, and they all have different things, different motivations, and different pros and quid pro quos between them. So 5 people laid out in a big semicircle, and the arrows drawn between them, between the different types of activities that make them work together. Kind of creates a little pentagram. Ha ha ha. Very cool. But then I started looking at how each of those could be revealed in a sequence over the course of that year. So November is kind of the end of hunting season, so that's an obvious start with hunters, and that kind of ties into the initial plot that I wanted to put my characters through in the first place. Well, then I have a line drawn from the hunter to the scientist, where the hunter delivers bodies to the scientist for some special research that she's going to be doing to try to make more effective defenses and offensive weaponry against the characters. So that means that somewhere down the line there will be a connecting plot thread between those two parties. But between November and whenever this happens, there's always December, which is Christmas, Christmas time, and that's a great opportunity to introduce the priest. So starting in November, we have our hunters, and then we have the priest come in, and then maybe that's now the good time to bring in the scientists in like January. So then we start to get these cross connections between each of these individual pieces over the course of at least the very beginning of that story. Well, I sat down and I fleshed out, like, what are the different kinds of scenes that would happen in every single month in the story, and I plotted out which would be the primary and secondary plot lines for each of those individual months, and I kind of came up with a title for what each month would be. So for instance, November, when they first start, it's called Training Day, and then the A plot line here is Hunters, and the B plot line here is Politics, because as I said, that's the beginning of when canvassing happens. So the characters are going to see some things that are hopefully subtextual happening in that subplot there, and it won't trigger them to go run off and kill this politician right away, but at least to put things on their radar, to kind of seed things through the narrative so that as further pieces of the conspiracy are revealed that lead up to the grand finale in the final months of the campaign, that they'll at least have these threads to pull and to work with as they go along. So I plotted out the entire thing month by month for all of the 13 months in this storyline. And next, what I plan to do is to draft out what the story is for each individual month. And so what I've done, I've gotten myself a great big box of note cards, and I'm going to be putting together individual plot lines and scenes for each of the month's stories. And maybe that'll be the next video that I talk about, is how I build out each individual component part of the campaign. So that's my video for today. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to our channel. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. And if you have any questions about how I build the campaign or about the timeline that I'm putting together, please drop those questions down in the crunch. And I will see you all next Friday. Cheers!